Today is a special day. It's always special to talk on the last meeting of the year. So for the ones who perhaps don't know, today is the last Sunday that we are gathering, and the center will be closed for the next 2 Sundays. But it's special because as I was preparing last night and this morning, I was thinking about the entire year and thinking about all the things that together as a group we have accomplished, we have done, and we have learned. Whether here in the public group or in our study groups, so much we have a chance to learn this year together. And no matter what we were talking about, no matter what the topic is, the base for all our teachings and our understanding of life comes from here, comes from the teachings of Jesus. And we started to celebrate Jesus' birthday, not so much to the world per se, his physical birth, but his birth in us, within us, since the beginning of the month, talking about him as a friend that we can count on. Last week we look at his role as a psychotherapist in our lives. And today we are going to take a quick look at his role as a master. We are going to attempt to do a short lecture because we will have a little presentation from the kids at the end, and even more important than that, I would like to give you, each one of you, the time before you leave, not to rush out of the door as we do some Sundays to attend to our commitments, but have a time within our time to give each other a big hug, wishing a wonderful Christmas and a Happy New Year, because we go away. It's a good and important rest for us. But we do miss being here. We do miss each one of you. We do miss the energy. And by the time that January comes back, we are so ready to be back here with all of you. So that's the plan for today. So we're going to talk about Jesus the Master. And many times we have mentioned here a little bit about Jesus' role in relation to our planet. But it's, no matter how many times I hear it, it's just very difficult to understand the concept. So I think it's important to put, if we're gonna call him masters, we can say, okay, what are his credentials, right? Because when I applied for my job at Nova, I had to send them my history, my CV, right, with my credentials. So what's his credentials? So we can think that humankind has been on the face of Earth for about 250,000 years, more or less. The planet was formed 4.5 billion of years ago. And so in between the formation of the planet and the appearance of the human race, we have billions of years where the planet was prepared by superior spirits to come to a condition where human life could exist. So billions of years preparing the environment, the atmosphere, the geology, allowing for the plants to germinate, for the animals to come in place, so that we could come to our new home, to our new school, and to learn and to evolve. And one spirit from the very, very beginning of the formation of the planet has been in charge of this spaceship, and this is the spirit in charge. We learn in the Spirit's book that spirits who are in charge of managing the universe with God are called pure spirits. So some of their roles is the formation of new planets and the guidance of humanity. So this man, this spirit, 4.5 billions of years ago, was a pure spirit. So these are his credentials. Good enough, I think. And so he came to teach us, and in a dialogue that happened around Easter, he would say at close to the end of his life to his disciples, I no longer call you servants, because a servant does not know his master's business. Instead, I have called you friends, for everything that I learned from my Father, I have made known to you. In John. So, what did he come to teach us? He came to teach us everything that he has learned from his Father. He came to teach us what is the experience of living in a happy and perfect world. He came to teach us what are the fundamental characteristics of virtues that we need to acquire and we need to develop in order to be able to partake in this experience. So what Jesus did is he came to tell us about his own experience, to share with us his own experience as a pure spirit and what it takes to get there. And he left us a workbook. He left us the gospel. And the gospel, it's not simply a prayer book or a religious book. Based on these ideas, we can look at this book and say, here is the synthesis, the summary of these experiences of a number of highly evolved spirits who, under the guidance of Jesus, have come to tell us, look, in the entire universe, humbleness and unconditional love are treasures of the human soul. So the synthesis, the homework is here in this book. It's a book where, again, these souls have come to share their experiences. And how did Jesus teach? So today we're going to look a little bit into his methodology. A spirit of this magnitude is speaking to children. So one of his first teaching strategies was to make himself little, in the sense of being able to connect with our situation, where we were. So any of us, if we want to explain anything to our children, we adapt our language so the children can understand what we mean. And that's precisely what he did. So he made himself little so he could live with us horizontally. Second, he knew the students. And he did talk about that last week. He knew as well. One of the strategies of teaching, and I'm learning that myself, and I'm thinking, forget all of the books, let me just follow what Jesus did, because that is perhaps, no, for sure, the most efficient method of teaching. So, but one of the things that he did is he knew well the students. He knew the context that the students were in. He knew how they lived their lives. So as a master, he had the amazing ability of looking at things of the daily lives, mundane occurrences, use those facts to draw from them cosmic and divine lessons. And so there he is, observing that in the houses, the people, the women for most part, would light the candle to make light in the room at night. And in observing this very simple, mundane fact, he will come up with this divine teaching by saying, neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on its stand and it gives light to everyone in the house. And by that, he was trying to teach us that we should not hide the light. as for examples the church and the religious people throughout times have done, kept the light for themselves in order to keep also the power of knowledge for themselves and keep the crowds in a state of ignorance. So, a very profound teaching that came from the observation of something that was so common in the daily lives of the people of the time. But there is something else if we look at the teachings of Jesus and also at the effects that the gospel have in our lives. One of the things for sure that shifts once the gospel starts to take place in our hearts is the way that we see and perceive life and the events and the facts. And Jesus taught us to see life and the events of life from a completely, entirely new perspective, the perspective of the immortal spirit. He had a different way of looking at things and looking at us. There is a short story that doesn't illustrate completely, but I think it starts to introduce this concept that is told by the Spirit Humberto de Campos. He said that Jesus was walking with the disciples and they passed by a dog that was dead. And each one of the 12 disciples who passed by the dog had some not nice comment to make about the dog. Whether the appearance of the dog was horrible, whether the smell of the dog was horrible. But Jesus, when he passed and he looked last to that dog, he was able to see that the dog had really, really white and beautiful teeth, and that was his observation. So, like I said, it doesn't illustrate completely, but it does bring this idea, because a lot of times when we look at life, I have done this myself, I wish to be in a different place. I say, well, if I'm in a different place, I'll probably be happy. If I'm in a different planet with the spirits who are already in the regeneration stage, maybe I'll be better. And what Jesus come to teach us is the problems are not outside of us, are not in life, but it's in the way that we are looking and approaching life and the events of life. It's our way of looking, our way of perceiving. And if we're able to shift our perception based on our knowledge and understanding of life, based on the knowledge and understanding of immortality, because he built his gospel based on his strength, his faith is founded on the principle of immortality. He never lost touch with the fact that he was an immortal being. We lose touch moment to moment with our own immortality. And as we lose touch with the essence of who we are, then things feel chaotic in our lives. We have a sense that we are losing control. So he taught us from the perspective of the immortal being, and that created an entire shift on our perception, including the perception of failure. Because a lot of times in our daily lives, things are going to happen. And from the material perspective, our interpretation is going to be, I'm failing. It didn't go right. And yet, from the spiritual perspective, a lot of times there is so much learning, there is so much growth, there is so much opportunity that we a lot of times fail to see, fail to understand, because again, we miss our eyes, our look are not the look that he had of life and that he tried to teach us, the look of the immortal spirit. The event of the cross, I think, is perhaps one of the biggest examples that can illustrate this concept. We're going to talk about different aspects of it. For many people at the time, and perhaps many people today, nowadays, when they look at Christ on the cross, the idea that we have, the immediate association that we have is of defeat. He was crucified. He lost. And many people at the time came to the disciples and said, but didn't he say that he was a king? What kind of king is he that he cannot save himself? People who really didn't have any understanding of what was really going on, and yet from this moment, so many valuable lessons came to us. And that takes us to another important point in the methodology that Jesus used to teach us. We find in our society many spiritual leaders nowadays. And spiritual leaders are really good in telling people what to do. Oh, you must forgive. Oh, you must do this, you must do that. And yet, not always, and not necessarily, because it's part of our humanity, their lifestyle, their behavior, their attitudes will not match what they're telling others to do. On the contrary, Jesus never told us to do anything per se. In reality, he always took the lead and taught us the most powerful tool that he used was his ability to exemplify every single teaching. So at some point, everybody remembers and knows well when he came and told us, you have heard that you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I say to you, love your enemies. Bless those who curse you. Do good to those who persecute you, that you may be sons of our Father in heaven. For he makes his sun rise on the evil and on the good, and sends rain to the just and to the unjust. So he said that. And at the cross, he gave the biggest example of his own teaching. Because when the soldiers came to take him to be judged and to be crucified, Peter tried to defend him. And there is a dialogue where Jesus says to him, and I'm just making a little bit more mundane words here, what do you think? I cannot, if I really want, I couldn't save myself? Sure he could. But he had in mind the higher purpose of his mission. This was necessary. It was necessary because at this moment, so many important and essential lessons he would leave to us. The lesson of the immortality with the resurrection a few days later. And here, from the top of the cross, when he was experienced the maximum of human suffering through sarcasm of the enemies, through abandonment of his friends, through persecution, hostility, physical aggression, torture. He had the strength from the top of the cross to say what? Father, forgive them, because they do not know what they are doing. And there, my friends, is where lies the strength of the teachings of Jesus, and that is precisely what makes him the master. Different than anyone, his life is a living example, a living testimony of every single of his teachings. And a lot of times and in a lot of religions, this moment is interpreted as a sacrifice that Jesus did to humanity. And yet, when we think about his life and we think about his grandiosity, one other important teaching that he leaves to us is the teaching of renouncement. As he, a pure spirit, gave up temporarily the realms of bliss where he lived to be with us, to teach us. Undergoing all kinds of sufferings and difficulties, not because he needed for educational purposes as we do from time to time, but purely out of love for us. And that is an important lesson, because that's something that's for us. And if you are in our conference in March, we are going to address that. The ability to renounce the things of this world in order to find the essence in us. So we have a faith. We say, no, I believe, I want. The difficulty, one of the reasons why it's so difficult to renounce is we don't even know what comes after. What's being offered to us are feelings, are emotions unknown to us. So a lot of times it's just very difficult to leave what we know. But he came to teach us that. So he's our master, and if we would summarize some of the methods that he used to teach us, we would say that, again, he who is much bigger than our minds can really conceive, made himself little. He spoke to us in a language that was accessible to us, that we could understand, and most importantly, he taught us by example. When he was talking to one of his disciples, the disciple was very worried because he wanted to increase the number of people who would be following. He wanted to have more followers. And Jesus said to him that his gospel, his message was not a message for the numbers. Because the majority of the people, he said, was still traveling through the roads of illusion and still seeking happiness in the wrong sources. His happiness, his message, he said, was for people who are now tired of the same sensations and are seeking something different. And are seeking something that they realize the world cannot give them. They are seeking to drink a different type of water. And so it's a very difficult message. It's not for everyone. And a lot of people will call themselves Christians but are not ready for the sacrifices and for the renunciation that comes with this option. But I assure you, even though I myself cannot speak of such feelings and emotions yet, because very much like you, I'm trying to discover what they are, right? But what we learn and what we know is that in every transition process, there is always first that feeling of loss. So we choose to follow his gospel. And as we start giving up on things that we know don't bring us what we are truly seeking and searching for, we feel a horrible sense of loss. Horrible. And we don't have immediately anything else to hold on to. So we need faith. We need to trust that that moment too will pass. And for the ones who persevere, for the ones who trust, they will get to the other side, to the other edge. And they will start to experience right here, not after we die, already these celestial feelings. Perhaps they will last a little bit. Perhaps they won't be strong enough yet, but we will recognize them. We will recognize them because they will feel different than anything else. It's a level of peace. It's a level of harmony. You start to feeling the presence of the good spirits near you. You start to feeling a different energy in your life, and you start to desire their energy and the shift more and more into your life. But you need to give yourself a chance. You need to give yourself a chance. And Paul, in writing to Corinthians, he said something interesting. He said, now you go and be the living epistles of the gospel. So it's not for everyone, because the invitation is for each one of us to be a living message. So it's not an intellectual process. The message is not an intellectual one. It's a message to the heart. It's a message for each one of us to integrate these principles and to become, in our daily lives, we come here to nourish our souls, to fuel our tanks. But the true temple is out there. The true opportunity for worship is our ability to live the gospel, to live the principles as we work every day, as we attend to others. That's our temple. And that's also what he taught. Because he didn't preach within walls. He was preaching everywhere. He was preaching as he was living, as he was doing, as he was fishing, as he was visiting people in their houses. Every single moment of his life was an opportunity to teach. The world is his temple. So I think that's a very important message that he leaves us to as we live here today to celebrate Christmas, to celebrate the power of his message. I would like to leave you with this invitation that comes from Paul in his letter to Corinthians. As we celebrate Christmas, as we go home to be with our loved ones, perhaps for next year or for this new Christian year that is about to start, let's make a commitment. Because I was reading to my children in our gospel at home another day, what's the name of the book? The Lord's Prayer, the book by Mei Mei. And we are explaining to them, how can we praise God? Ways in which we can praise God. How do we praise God? Where is the religious aspect of what we do? Is in that, is in living here, accepting the invitation, and accepting the invitation from Paul to be living messages of Christ out there. That's the way in which we will express and manifest our religiosity. The religious aspect of Spiritism is a relational aspect. Is to take the message and bring to our relationships, and each time in our daily lives and in our relationships, we can look at someone with mercifulness. We can be good towards someone else. We are living the message, and we are doing like him. We're praising the Father for everything that he has taught you. Thank you.